Thank you all for coming. We'll go ahead and get started. By way of introduction, I'm Rick Green. I'm the Development Services Director. So thank you all for coming to our developer outreach meeting. What I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about what's happening within our department. We've had a lot of changes and upgrades and things that I'll mention. I'll talk about our new enterprise permitting and licensing system. Give everybody a snapshot of where we are today. And then within West Palm Beach, I'll talk about our Class A office markets, our hotel developments, mixed-use districts, our residential developments, and our workforce housing incentives that we're working on. And then we'll adjourn the meeting. So I'll fly through these real quickly. For those of you that are interested, this presentation and the PowerPoint will be posted online, and I'll show that on the last slide. Let me introduce my staff that's here. Robert Brown, our building official, Dodie Glass, our assistant director, in the back, Angela Van, and Tasia Kirkwood, my senior administrative assistant. I don't know if anybody else is here, but anyway, thank you for coming. For those of you not familiar with the developer outreach meeting, this is our 21st meeting. This is something we started back in 2013 to give updates to the development community, property owners, engineers, developers, architects, engineers, kind of an overview of what's happening, both internal to the department and external to the department. It's a way of fostering public-private partnership. Again, having spent 13 years as a developer myself, I recognize and appreciate the importance of working together on these projects. And again, if you're interested in being notified not only of this meeting, but any board meetings, planning board, our community redevelopment agency, downtown action committee. If you go to this website, on our website under planning division, there's a section called e-notify. You can sign up, so when a meeting is scheduled, it'll send you the agenda and let you know what's going to be discussed. So let me begin with an update on our development services department. So approximately a year ago when we met, our department had about 22 vacancies, so we were running at a 25% vacancy rate. So it was a bit of a struggle because a year ago we were extremely busy. Not that we've slowed down all that much, but we'll talk about that. So at that time, around this time last year, we did a department salary study that we completed. We looked at 8 other comparable cities in Florida. We looked at 4 counties. We presented that information to both administration and our human resources department. Around the same time, we were realizing a significant increase in our tax base, almost an 18% increase the year before and 15% last year. So those two factors, coupled with the notion that maybe we have more disposable money to spend, so as a result, we implemented an across-the-board 20% increase for most of the positions with the city. It wasn't a bonus, it basically made us a little bit more competitive with other cities. So where we stand today, we went from 22 vacant positions down to 9. And I'm sorry to announce that Dylan Battles, our assistant building official, just announced his resignation on Monday, so he's leaving us, but we've got 9 compared to the 22 we had a year ago. So we've gone from a 25% vacancy rate to 11, and so we're making progress, and certainly the impact to the salaries did help. With regard to historic preservation, for the first time in a long time, we're working on design guidelines. So we're going to be talking to several firms about preparing a report for us that we will take to the Historic Preservation Board to provide a little bit more clarity on some of the historic preservation issues we've been facing over the past few years. With regard to our zoning code, we have been working with our law department to amend Article 2, which is the administrative section, basically how do boards work. So there are different rules in place now with our DAC, our Historic Preservation Board, Planning Board, and ZBA, so we're going to try to consolidate and make those rules a little bit more consistent. Article 4 is our downtown master plan. We have not updated our downtown master plan since 2007. So we have an RFP that we're close to finalizing right now that will go out next month. And then as part of that, we are also have begun work on a downtown traffic study. So for those of you who are not aware, since 1997, we have been operating under what is known as a TCEA, or a Transportation Concurrency Exception Area. That is approved by both Palm Beach County and the state. And what that means is that we can build just under 15.1 million square feet of non-residential development if and only if we build 6,934 residential units. So the good news is we prepare a report that goes to the county and the state in March of every year. So just last month, we submitted a report that shows we've got just under 8,500 residential units built and just over 10 million square feet of non-residential. So we're well over the ratio that's required of residential to non-residential. We have to maintain that ratio per 1,000 square feet of non-residential of 0.46, and we're over 0.83 at this point. And the thought is that you've got a balance of residential to non-residential. If you've got more people living downtown, the presumption is that you've got less people having to get into an automobile and drive. So since 2007 or 8, we've had to maintain that ratio of 0.46, and the good news is that we're well over that. When you look at everything that's under construction right now, you see that we're going to end up over 10,000 residential units with a total of about 11 and change of non-residential. So we still have a little bit of room to go, but part of what we're trying to do with the downtown traffic study is to convince the county that capacity of non-residential should be increased, particularly with the number of residential units that we built. So we have met with the county. We have identified a methodology. We'll be using the VISM model. Our staff has done an analysis of every single parcel in the downtown, so we have a very good handle of what's built. We'll also look at what has been approved and what we expect to be built, and we hope to have that analysis done. And then part of what we want to do is look at the impacts of the Fern Street crossing, because we suspect that that's going to relieve some of the traffic that we experience today on both Okeechobee and Banyan. So that's ongoing. So back to the zoning code, we're also looking at our mixed-use districts. We're working with Dover Coal and our CRA to prepare a plan for the Broadway mixed-use district. We hope to have that plan to the planning board hopefully in August of this year. And then we're going to be trying to consolidate the 182 separate permitted uses we have in our zoning code now, reduce that in half. So we'll be bringing that forward as well as amendments to our sign code. So we're staying real busy with our zoning code. With regard to EPL, most of you are familiar with the new software system that we've implemented. We've been working on this for well over 4 or 5 years, spending over $8 million to implement this system. We went live in July of last year. Everything is totally electronic. Plans are all submitted electronically, payments made electronically. Recently, we did experience an issue with Bluebeam. That was felt only on the staff side. It didn't impact the customers that were submitting plans, but we're making progress. We're getting that issue resolved, and we're continually tweaking the system to make sure everything is working properly. So we've got a few outstanding issues that we're trying to correct, but for the most part, we think it's working fairly well. We did not merge and rotate our business tax licensing program into this, so that's something we are working on now. We didn't want to take on too much at this point, and that's a big task, so we're going to be doing that as part of our EPL updates for next year. So from the customer side, this is generally what you see when you're submitting a plan or a building permit. It'll have the number, the type, the project name, apply date. You can see where you are in the progression of the plan reviews. And the beauty is that because it's electronic, you could have 8 or 9 people reviewing the plan at the same time, as opposed to the old method of having this paper set of plans that gets transmitted from one person to the other. So we're hopeful that this is going to speed up our review times. And the other good thing of EPL is you get a wonderful report writing system. So we're drafting and preparing new reports that we can look at. I like to look at what new projects have come in. So this is just the first 6 months of the fiscal year, which ended March 30th. We had 255 applications received, and if you want to look at that in more detail, you can, but it'll show which projects were submitted for Downtown Action Committee, Planning Board, which one were zoning confirmation letters, Historic Preservation Board cases, etc. Another new software that we're very excited about is one called Open Counter. So it's an online platform that people can get onto, ask questions without having to rely on staff, and ask questions about a parcel, and I'll show an example here in a minute. But we're working on this, and we hope to have this done here by late summer. But the goal is to make it easy for residents and business owners to look at zoning and what the requirements would be. So if you're interested in developing a parcel, you can go online, you'll see a map of where you can build this particular use, if it's a restaurant, if it's a daycare facility, whatever it might be. We've talked to folks in Orlando and Miami who are using the system, and they really like it. It's not designed to be used for submitting applications or building permits to us, but it's more to find information about our process and a particular parcel. So I'll show you an example. So this is what you see on the screen. So let's say that I wanted to open a pizza shop here at City Hall. You fill in the type of use, what you're proposing to do. You'll get another screen that talks about the project type. So in this case, I check restaurants with no drive-through. It will then give you a map of the entire city. This is just a cutoff portion. So the green is where it's permitted, the yellow is where it's a conditional use. And this would apply to any use that you're interested in doing, whether office building, restaurant. And then you fill out some more information and it'll tell you what permits are required. It'll actually send you or have a link to the actual applications that you need. So it's basically a hand-holding mechanism. So in this case, it'll also write a report at the end. So if I want to do a Greens Pizza at City Hall, it'll give you a full-blown report of everything you want to do. So we're testing it now, but this is just a test I did, and it seems to work pretty well. So we hope to have this operational here very shortly, and we hope you find it useful as well. The other thing we've done is our planning open area, where a lot of you have meetings with staff. We've designed what we call a WebEx conference room. So we've installed two 94-inch TVs. As you can see at the base of those two televisions, we have cameras that film the room. We have one in the back, and then we have microphones that hang from the ceiling. So what we like to do is in the future, when you have a presentation coming before us with the PPRC or Plans and Plats Review Committee, we would ask that a representative be there in person. But if you have an architect in Miami or New York, you don't want him or her to fly down, we're going to have a Zoom capability set up where they can zoom in and see everything that's ongoing. If you're meeting with us and you want to bring a flash drive or show us particular plans, this will accommodate that. So Tasia knows the system better than I, but we're working through all the kinks now, but it's up and running. This is a blow-up of the two TVs, and these are some of the meetings that we expect to have here with the 94-inch TVs. So Plans and Plats, developer meetings, Stanley Cup, NBA Finals. So we hope to see you at some of those championship games, but I'm kidding about that. If the mayor's watching, I'm kidding. So quickly talk about a snapshot of where we are today. I'm a numbers guy, so I apologize. But this is kind of a summary of planning revenues over the last 25 or so years. The green color represents an increase from the previous year, and the red represents a decrease from the previous year. But the arrow represents when COVID hit. And I'm still amazed at what happened here in West Palm Beach, that while most of the country was shutting down during COVID, we went the opposite direction. We had so much migration into the city and so much new activity. So you see what happens. And I like to use two metrics to kind of guide or see what's happening with development in the city. So the first is planning revenues. That's when permits or projects come in. So we know the volume of work, and then most of those projects, but not all, but most of those get converted to building permits. So that's the second metric I like to use. But you see here that we had a tremendous increase during COVID. It peaked right in the middle of COVID. And while it's going down, it's still leveling. It's still as high as it's been most years over the last 25 years. Building permit revenue, even more surprising. Again, you see that's when COVID hit. It's gone up. We had two really big years. It's dropped, but you still see the volume. The far right is what we're anticipating this year based on the activity through the first 7 months of the fiscal year. This chart represents building permit revenue by quarter dating back to 2015 on the left. And you can see the trend here. This is when COVID hit. When that happened, we experienced a 38% drop in building permit revenue, followed by 6 consecutive quarters of growth. So for a year and a half, we just kept seeing more projects and more building permits coming in. And the highest we've ever recorded, the highest quarter happened again right in the middle of COVID. You see the yellow outline there. And then the second COVID variant hit, we had a slight reduction, 28% reduction in our revenue. And then it's been up and down since then. The last quarter, it's peaked back up a little bit. And if you look at where we were the first 3 months of this calendar year, January through March, that's still higher than almost 68% of all the quarters dating back to 2015. So we're still staying very busy. When you look at the breakdown of permits, this is the first 6 months of this fiscal year. You see that residential permits outnumber commercial permits 2 to 1, but the commercial value, as you would expect, is about 40% higher than residential. So a great deal of activity both on the commercial and on the residential front. So these are the biggest months of building revenue we experienced. The green represents last fiscal year, the yellow 2 years ago, and the pink 3 years ago. This is all during COVID. So 7 of the 10 biggest months we've experienced in the city of West Palm Beach happened during COVID. And what's interesting is the month we are in right now, this is through April 22nd, we have already collected 1.3 million, so that will move into the top 10. So the month we're in right now will go down as one of the biggest months. I don't know if it'll catch the 1.9 on the far left, but still a very busy month. So things haven't slowed down a whole lot for us on the building side. Then I like to compare revenues over the last 10 years during that same period of time. So through the end of March, this is a 6-month update. You see the last 10 years, the current year we're in now, we would place 4th. On building permits, we're 4th, but again, because of the big year we're having in April, you see that even though we still have another 6 or 7 days in April, we've already jumped up to number 3, and building permits will end up being number 3 by the end of the month. Oh, I'm sorry, it is number 3 right now. We had a little bit of business closure during COVID. The middle columns you see here of the 4, not a whole lot over this 4-year period. I believe there was a net increase of about 171 businesses. So there wasn't a wholesale closure that a lot of other cities experienced. And then the planning is where we're starting to see a little bit of an impact. So through 6 months, we would place 6th over the last 10 years for planning revenues. And in total for the department, we're 4th. Again, if you look at it through April, which still has a few days remaining, planning has jumped up a little bit to 7. So it's going to be kind of midway, maybe 5 or 6 when it's all said and done. And then the total revenues are going to be about 3. So we're still staying busy, but from a planning side, we're seeing less projects coming in at this point. The number of building permits has been decreasing since 2021. But surprisingly, while the number of permits is decreasing, the value of the permits has been increasing. So when you put the two side by side, number of permits in green, the value of permits in blue, you see that right now the average permit's about 69,000 compared to 34,000 maybe 7 years ago. And then overall for the entire department, that includes all our business tax revenue, building and planning, you see that we are 3rd, and again, we would expect that because it's going to be tough to match the last 2 years that we had with all the COVID development we are experiencing. And then the good news is, again, prior to the last 2 years, over the 10-year period, we averaged about a 6.5% increase in our tax base. 2 years, that went up by almost 18%. Last year, it went up by over 15%. So a tremendous amount of increase as a result of these COVID projects now hitting the tax roll. And we have more of those, so we expect another big number when the property appraiser gives us our number right around June 1st. And again, here you see in green increases in our millage, red decreases in the millage rate. The yellow or gold color is where it stayed the same. And because of the increases in the value we've experienced, for the first time in 14 years, we've had a decrease in our millage rate the last 2 years. And I believe the Commission is going to try to seek a 3rd consecutive decrease in the millage rate. Population continues to grow, approximately 22,000 new people in West Palm Beach since 2010. That's a pretty significant number. So now let me talk about Class A office developments. I've shown this graphic before, but pre-COVID, we had 3 projects, 4 towers, comprising about 1 million square feet of Class A office development. From 2008 to 2020, we did not have a single new Class A office building built. I remember being in meetings with Harvey and others trying to recruit companies like Mercedes to West Palm Beach. We just didn't have the square footage in the 3 projects I mentioned here. In 2018, we adopted the Okeechobee Business District as a means of trying to incentivize developers to come into West Palm Beach. And then COVID hit, and then now we've got about 3.1 million in the pipeline. Of that 3.1, we're somewhat confident that at least 2 million will be built. 360, of course, complete. And then we had 2 of the projects within the Okeechobee Business District have moved forward. So again, related, had completed 360 Rosemary, 1 Flagler under construction. Still good for July, David. So that'll open in July. 515, which is just east of 360, is approved. We'll start at some later date. And right now, Related is working on the east and west towers. That's the old Movieco block, the Movieco Brio blocks. But these 5 buildings represent about 1.7 million square feet, which is a little over half of the total. Jeff Green is still working on his 1 West Palm project. We've got 300 Banyan under construction. That's nearing completion as well. West Palm Point, the tent site, has a foundation permit issued, so hopefully they will begin shortly. And then we've got 3 other projects, and we're hopeful and anxious to see if these 3 move forward as well. With regard to hotel developments, we see a similar trend, 1,000 rooms pre-COVID. Now we've got about 2,000 rooms in the mix right now. 3 projects have been completed, 1 West Palm under construction. The others have been approved, waiting to see if they're going to begin. You probably have read recently the county issued an RFP for a new 600-room hotel by the convention center. They have a parking garage there. Well, Related, who built the Hilton Hotel, was the selected bidder of the 3 firms, and they are moving forward in negotiations with the county right now. At the same time, they have submitted an application to the city for a 420-room hotel, so we expect that there'll be something a little over 400 rooms built at this location. The undecided question that Related is addressing is, will they be able to park in the garage? So those discussions will be ongoing. But nonetheless, we expect to see, if everything gets built, a doubling of hotel rooms in the downtown area. Again, these 3 projects, the Canopy, the Ben, AKA Hotel, completed. Jeff Green's 1 West Palm under construction. Transit Village is approved, working out issues with the county. And then we have a series of other projects that have been approved. The Nora project, as part of the Nora development, is still in review, and that will be going to our Downtown Action Committee here shortly. With regard to mixed-use districts, I'm pleased to say that Banyan K has a new owner. If you remember, that hotel was stalled on the property, but they are moving forward now. We talked about the Dover Coal study for the Broadway mixed-use district. We also made some recent changes to the CMUD area. We enacted zoning code changes back in 2014. And then when you look at an aerial of what's happened in the 6 years since we adopted those changes, you see nothing much has changed. So we went back and amended the zoning code to create an incentive-laden Curry mixed-use district that allows for a base height, in the case of the 3 core districts, a base height of 111 feet, and you can go as high as 306 or 350 feet if you meet 1 or several of these incentives to achieve the greater height. And that's proven to be successful. So Neil Kozikoff is completing his Broward block development. Olara is under construction with the Twin Tower development in CMUD. Jeff Green received planning board approval for his project, his Twin Tower project, and then Related is moving forward with Shore Crest, also in the CMUD district. So all of these have happened since we enacted the more recent changes. So we had some success with this, and then we saw that there was an incentive on the part of developers to move forward. So we recently extended the CMUD area a little bit further south, not quite to the hospital, but fairly close. And as a result, we received an application a couple weeks ago from Related Group for the Ritz-Carlton. So that project is in review, but like the area to the north, they'll have a base height of 111 feet, and with incentives, they're going to go up to 306 feet. So that project is in review. One of the other things we're trying to accomplish is we have a project at Northwood Square at the very west end of the Northwood Road development. It's a mixed-use development of residential and retail. We'd like to take Northwood Road and extend it across the Dixie Highway and tie into the newly configured Curry Park, which the work has not begun yet, but the area outlined in red is an opportunity for Jeff Green, in this case, to get additional height. So it would connect to the $35 million renovation that's ongoing with Curry Park. That work will hopefully start soon and be completed next year. So we'll hopefully be successful in building that roadway. With regard to residential developments, on the South Flagler corridor, just south of downtown, everybody's familiar with the Bristol. That was the first domino, if you will, that got knocked down, and then that was followed by La Clara, which is nearing completion now at 1515. South Flagler House just had the the groundbreaking a couple weeks ago. Forte is under construction, and then we just received an application for Family Church, a twin tower, 28 and 32-story residential tower. So the South Flagler corridor there is starting to see a lot of high-rise residential, very expensive units. We're requiring a little landscape corridor along Flagler Drive to maintain an open space, and I think related for this nice aerial that they presented as part of their last submittal. But you see the buildings that build out with the Clara at the left, the two towers next to that, South Flagler House, Forte in the background, the two towers for Family Church, and then the existing Trianon and Bristol buildings. When you add up the value of all of these, it's just an estimate on my part, but it represents about $3 billion worth of value. That's about $24 million in revenue to the city in the form of taxes. So significant investment along that corridor. On the south end, we're working with the Shops at the Press, they're going through an amendment right now to provide some space for Palm Beach Atlantic, which will be occupying a portion of these buildings. Carefree 6, trying to work out issues, the developer with the El Cid residents, but mixed-use development along South Dixie Highway. And then, of course, the 8111 South Dixie, the city-owned property, 6.5 acres at the foot of the entrance to West Palm Beach. Icon Marina Village, related group just opened, beautiful twin towers. These are 2 of 6 towers that will be built on the old Rybovich Marina. We also have Alba, a 55-unit development. And then we have Palm Beach Riverstone, which has completed the 374 units. This is at I-95 and 45th Street. They've completed the residential units. They're making an amendment to the hotel to add additional keys, so that'll be 234 rooms. And then the Wawa is at the entrance right along 45th Street. And for all of those in attendance, Related was gracious enough to give everybody a $10,000 Wawa gas card. So see David after the meeting, and you get free gas for a long time. But thank you, David. So let me talk quickly about workforce housing initiatives. So when you look at the cost of housing back in 2016, you see all these different cities aligned on the right. So back in the second quarter of 2016, it was estimated that about 59% of the housing units in the city were deemed to be affordable. And you see what's happened, and again, this is not keen to just West Palm Beach, it's all the cities. So that number has dropped down to about 35.7% in the first quarter of 2023. So we've known for some time that workforce housing is a priority to us, and we've spent a great deal of time working on this. So we began in our downtown area when we adopted Ordinance 4958-21 and simply stated, let's presume that the market rent for a one-bedroom was $2,100, and we wanted the developer to rent those units no more than, let's say, 80% of area median income, which in this case is $1,285. We met with developers and they said, well, with the price of land, it just doesn't work. We can't keep these units affordable, and the numbers didn't work. So we came up with the idea that if you're building a new project, you're generating tax revenue to the city, why don't we fund that difference between what we're asking you to charge and what the market is? So we offered that in the form of a tax rebate. So we're hopeful that more developers will take advantage of this, but we ask that these units remain affordable for 20 years, and for the first 10 years, or half of that 20-year life cycle, we will make the developer whole and bridge that gap between the market rate and what we'd like them to pay. We then took a similar concept a little further, and for the rest of the city outside of downtown, we said if you have a zoning district, we will allow you to double your density. So if you're zoned MF32, you can go up to 64 units an acre. Oops, let me go back. You could go back, but we would ask that 25% of the total mix or 50% of the additional reflected here in the green must be set aside for workforce housing. Around that same time, and then we've had several projects come in, some utilizing the program, some just on their own, but Affiliated's Grand Project has some of the units as workforce. Flagler Station is entirely workforce. And then now the Spruce, talk to Rex, he's going to be building this, some workforce as part of the Spruce. And then Keith's project, Keith Spina with 512 Clematis under construction right now. And then after we had this in place, the state moved forward with the Live Local Act, and that in essence preempted the resolution that we had that I just discussed. So that went into effect on July 1st, 2023. And we didn't see that as providing a whole lot of incentive to developers in the city. It did not apply to residential properties. You had to have at least 20% of your land area in commercial and industrial property. And with our water catchment area comprising more than 20 square miles, we didn't meet that threshold. So the act said that it only applied to mixed-use districts in West Palm Beach. You had to have projects that were at least 65% residential, and 40% of the units had to be earmarked as workforce. Our resolution required 25, a little less onerous. And then the density would be the highest allowed in the jurisdiction, which in our case is 32 units of the acre. Again, under our resolution, you could double that density. And then height was not to be restricted below the height of anything within a mile of the project. And they had to remain affordable for 30 years and allowed for administrative approval of the projects. So we met with the development community and said you could do one of two things. You can wait until July 1st and submit under the Live Local Act, Senate Bill 102, or you can move forward with our resolution 30622. But our resolution sunsets and preempted by the state on June 30th. So if you want to come under resolution 306, you have to submit by June 30th. And no surprise, we had 7 projects come in around the last day. But the good news, all of these you see in green have been to the City Commission for special review. So if all are successful in getting built, we'll have 520 new workforce units in the city. And again, these are scattered all over the city, not in one geographic location. One of the projects that utilize this is 8111. This is, again, you see highlighted at the base of the city, the southerly entrance by our golf course. They originally were going to build 210 units. They decided to take advantage of our resolution 30622. So now they're doing a project with 358 total units, of which 90 will be workforce. So again, these are scattered throughout the city. And this project will also have a grocer as well. Another example that I'd like to share is a 1551 Forum Place. This is just east of the Outlet Mall. There's currently a 1-story office building comprising about 39,000 square feet. They're taking advantage of that resolution to build an 8-story, 238-unit development, of which 60 would be workforce housing units. So imagine people working in the office buildings there along Forum Way could live here and in essence walk to their workplace right down the street if they choose. So we're monitoring the second version of the Live Local Act. It's been approved by the state. It has not been presented to the governor for his signature yet. But we see that a lot of the conditions that are mandated in this act are very similar to what we had before. So again, I don't think that it's going to be of much assistance, but certainly we'll work with anybody if they want to come in under this legislation. But a lot of the same requirements with the legislation that we are working on. We amended our comprehensive plan so we can go back to something like we had before with our resolution 30622. We are creating land development regulations. Doty's taking the lead on that. We've had a couple outreach meetings with developers, and then we'd like to try to include What we didn't have in the earlier legislation was include some not-for-profits, schools, churches, if they want to be creative and provide workforce housing. We'd like to try to accommodate that. We had meetings on August 1st of last year, and more recently on March 26th of this year, we met across the hall and tried to solicit feedback from developers. So we have a workshop scheduled with the mayor and commission on May 20th. And we're going to the planning board. So Peter, you'll be seeing this very shortly, but we're going to come up with our regulations. We're going to create 3 tiers. The more workforce housing you do, the more affordable your project is, the easier it's going to be to get approved. So the simplest route will be, it'll be a staff level review. The worst case, you'll go straight to city commission for what we call a special review, and then the staff will review the site plan. So in summary, these are just some of the projects we're working on. The ones in red have received approval. The ones in yellow are seeking some type of approval. So as you can see, we're still very, very busy. I thank you all for coming. If you go to our website and go to, the website is WPB.org. I'll leave this up. If you go to government, click on our department, development services, and then go to planning and zoning, you should find a link to developer outreach. And I understand this is going to be posted sometime around 10 o'clock this morning. If you don't see it, then please let me know. But if you like, I can try to answer questions, but I thank you all for coming. And any questions? Yes. Sure. Yeah, that provision applies to downtown. So as everybody may know, our downtown is part of a community redevelopment agency. So the monies that we collect in taxes for the city obviously stays with the city. But with the TIF district, the tax increment financing district, we also are able to collect and capture the county taxes that are paid. So I think I saw Chris. Is Chris Rug here? He just stepped out. Okay. But yeah, Raphael knows. So under the TIF, we collect money that has to be earmarked and put back into the downtown. So the thought was, it's the old adage that we want to dangle a carrot in front of a developer and say, if you build a project, you'll get some of that revenue back that you would normally have to spend in the form of taxes. So simply stated, if the market rent is $3,000 and we want the developer to charge $2,000, if he builds a $50 million residential project and he's paying $1 million a year in taxes in the form of tax increment, we'll take some of that revenue and give it back to the developer to bridge that gap. So for the first 10 of the 20 years, he's still collecting the full market rent, but then he's on his own the second. But that's enough of incentive that he's getting more units, more development potential. So the hope is that at the end of the day, it's balanced and they're making more money in the long run, if that answered it. Anybody else? Okay, I'll hang around if anybody has any questions. My staff is here, but thank you all for coming. We'll try to do this every 6 months, but thank you.